Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm talking about five-star reads that you've probably never heard of. So the first book I wanted to talk about today is Human Remains by Elizabeth Haynes. This is a psychological thriller and this is my first entry into Elizabeth Haynes' writing. So if you enjoy Elizabeth Haynes and have another suggestion for me as to where to go next, then please leave those down in the comments for me. But this one follows Annabelle, who is a police analyst but finds the decomposing body of her neighbour one day when there was a horrible smell coming through, wafting through her garden window, and her cats were trying to get into the house next door for, I'm sure, the disturbing reasons that you can now imagine. And so she is shocked. This body was sat there for weeks without anyone knowing, and living alone herself and having quite a small life in that she really just travels to work and back. She has this fear now that she could end up dead, and one, her cats would eat her, and two, no one would find her body for ages after. And so she ends up, because the police dealing with the investigation seem to just think it's a natural death and aren't really doing anything about it, and Annabelle doesn't think this is right, she ends up doing her own investigation into this and seeing who this person had contact with, and this man appeared on her radar. And she got into contact with a journalist, and they started finding cases that were being labelled natural causes, but actually finding, the more we get into the story, that actually there's something more sinister than this going on. This is not, in a way, natural causes, and that there is actually a serial killer out there doing this to people. And so Annabelle is very much on the tail of this serial killer, and things very much come to a head and they meet. So this one is, yes, you'll be on the edge of your seat. Now this next one is one that I haven't heard anyone speak about, but this is The Orchard by David Hopen. Now the best way to describe this book is to say this is the secret history, but make it Jewish and set it in suburban Miami. I mean, if that isn't already selling you on this book, if you're not already running down the street to the library to get hold of this book, I don't know what else I can do, because I feel like so many people love the secret history, as do I, and this was the closest thing I've ever found to that same sense of satisfaction. So this boy, Ari, is an Orthodox Jew living in Brooklyn, and his parents pull him out because they're concerned about, you know, this type of people he's been falling into a crowd with. So they pull him out and hoof him down to Miami to this Jewish academy, and there he meets a group of boys who become his friend and their religion teacher, and the religious teacher takes on the mantle, if you like, and can be compared to the teacher in the, oh, I knocked my mic, in the secret history, where he is very much a mentor. He's schooling them and us actually on Judaism and the religious debates that the boys have, because they really are very interested in what this religious teacher has to say, and they have their own thoughts and opinions, and they discuss it, and we are there for those discussions. Similarly to how we were there for the discussions of the Greek tragedies in the secret history and the essays that they were writing. And so we're also there, though, in the, rather than being in the sort of freezing cold winters with the snow in the secret history, we're there in the Miami heat, and people are throwing, you know, garden parties and barbecue parties and swimming pool parties, and we get to know the parents of these boys as well as the boys outside of school, and it really is wonderful. I had such a joyous time with Ari. He is such a lovable, likeable protagonist, very similarly to the protagonist in Secret History. So if you're still watching this video and you haven't run down to the library or the bookstore to go and get it for yourself yet, then then let's move on to the next book. The next book on this list is Remember Me Like This by Bret, Antony, Johnston, and this is a quiet domestic thriller. Essentially, the premise is that a little boy was kidnapped 3 years ago, and he is now back. He's been found, and this is about what happens when the fairy tale ending happens and it's happily ever after and they're all reunited, and actually what that looks like in real life, because it actually is very different and it's traumatic, and everybody involved with that little boy has been traumatized in one way or another, and to deal with that trauma, the family itself has actually broken down and disintegrated, and so you have a very isolated, sad mother who is very estranged and detached from her husband and other child, and then you have the grandpa and grandma. The grandpa still has the flyers of his little grandson. He has a gun shop, the local gun shop, and people are asking him, "Oh, so I heard your grandson's back," and it's really about how a family reintegrates, how they cope, how they try and move forward, and how a community as well, because this is a very small community called Corpus Christi in the south of the US, and so everybody knows everybody knows what's happened, and so it's really about a mum coming to terms with what has happened to her son, and yeah, it is sad and it's very bleak and dark, but it's not too much of those things. It's still readable, enjoyable, and you really resonate strongly with that mother figure. The next one that I'm going to talk to you about today is Theatre of War by Andrea Jeftanovic. This is primarily a coming-of-age story as we follow 9-year-old Tamara, but it heavily deals with the psychological effects of war and the PTSD trauma that her father suffered during the Balkan War. Now, whilst this is specifically related to the Balkan War, actually the subjects and the themes that are being produced here could be about any father, could be about any man who has suffered that kind of psychological stress in war or in another scenario, and really it really does the book great justice to have the protagonist as Tamara, because we see things through her very youthful innocence, who just loves her father and wants him to be happy and better, and the writing is so beautiful, and it was so compelling. It was, I think, in the top 3, I believe, of the books I read last year, and it was a rare treat. The last book I wanted to talk about was actually my favourite book of 2022, and this was Against the Loveless World by Susan Abulhawa, and I wanted to include this because I haven't heard anybody else talk about it, and so I want to give this a highlight, so that if this sounds like a book that you would enjoy, that I bring it to your attention. So this is a story set in the Middle East. It's about a protagonist called Nur, and she grows up in Kuwait, but as a refugee travels through the Middle East, and ends up making a home in Jordan, and then travels again to Palestine. And so we follow her on her journey as a kind of young teenager, as she is growing up, and the financial hardships that she's facing with her family, and she gets into having to prostitute herself, and she ends up getting married to quite a horrible man, and then she ends up divorcing him and marrying somebody else, but whilst also at the same time is becoming radicalized. And so we actually meet Nur to start with in a solitary confinement cell, and we therefore are then wondering, how did she get here? And so the author takes us back in time where we meet Nur, and we then have this dual timeline going on where some chapters are narrated by Nur in solitary confinement, where she's telling us about her life and her husband and the work that she was doing in the resistance in Palestine against Israel, and then we flip back to the past timeline where Nur is travelling through the Middle East and is making friends along the way and that sort of thing. And so we really are rooting for and care deeply for this woman who has been through so much despite being still young, and I think when she's in the solitary confinement, she's in her kind of 40s, early 40s, and so this character really for me was very real, and she very much stays with me, and I still think about her, and I really do enjoy character-based plot, and this is character-based plot. Nur is our hero, my hero, and she takes us on a journey. She has such bravery and strength and grit, and at the same time femininity, and she's funny, and I understand why she has such great people around her, and people would want to be with her, because she is an amazing woman, and I think that this is the perfect book to end this video on, as five-star reads that you may never have heard of, because hopefully this is the one, well, all of them, but this one especially sticks in your mind as it has stuck in my mind. So with that, this brings me to the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you have a 5-star book that you don't really hear enough people talking about and you would like to kind of raise up and highlight, please put them down in the comments below, because I'm always on the lookout for amazing books. Bye guys.